As we've recently passed Limbus Company's first anniversary, I think it's about time that we do some reading into the text of the game we've had so far. In the past, I've said I don't want to do a full analysis until we get some conclusions, and so far the endings of Canto IV and V provide plenty of catharsis, so I guess that condition is fulfilled. Before we start, some things need to be addressed. First, if you care about my stance on the game and studio regarding its treatment of artists, you are free to pause the video now to read the full statement. Saying it out loud feels too pretentious for a video that is not about that. Regarding the video itself, it will touch on the first season of the story, which is to say, from Prologue to the end of Canto III. This is mostly due to the fact that for Canto IV, I would need to read up a whole lot on Korean poets from the early 20th century to truly give the story the respect it deserves. So that's gonna be a lot of work, and therefore another video later down the line. The aim of this analysis is reading into connections between the Limbus stories and the works of literature that inspired the main cast. I have released a video giving the brass tacks based on the pre-release teasers. Now we're delving deep. We're gonna draw lines between the game, the books, the lives of the authors of each if relevant, and prior Project Moon titles including the comics and novels. On that last point, I will try to be as terse and spoilerless as possible, but I assume that sometimes it will not be possible, so keep that in mind. Play the other games, gacha onlys. I will reference the exact translation used for each non-English work on the screen and in the video description. And last but not least, I'm not here to read the plot to you bit by bit. If something is worth pondering the implications of, I will, but I'm assuming I don't need to tell you who each sinner is or anything like that. With that structure in mind, let's delve into the very beginning of this story. The tale of our executive manager Dante starts similarly to the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, in a dark forest with a panther, a lion and a wolf stopping him from reaching, well, something. In the poem, it's climbing up a mountain to reach heaven. In Limbus, it's engraving the aspect, and we do not yet know what that may mean. While the political and theological allusions encoded within the three predatory animals to entities such as rich houses of Florence and Franz are likely not relevant to Limbus, it is worth noting that Alighieri was in exile when writing his opus. As such, I believe it may be assumed that our clockhead was on the run due to being disgraced by whatever powers they served prior to losing their head. It's also quite interesting that from the moment we first see them, they are clad in the iconic red suit of the Limbus Company manager, matching all the sinners. Limbus is not particularly shy about swapping or altering the sprites to match the story being told, and it's also clearly there in the CG splash art. So I think we can also safely assume that by that point their job contract was already signed and crossing their previous employer may have been the reason for this exile. The poem takes place on the Good Friday, the day in remembrance of Jesus' death, as our protagonist, while technically alive, is not in the world of the living. The journey takes Dante through hell first, before continuing to purgatory and heaven. In classical works that had heavy inspiration on Dante, such as Homer's Odyssey and Virgil's Aeneid, the heroes go through the underworld in the middle of their respective journeys, and here it is the starting point. This is due to the fact that before being able to see the heavenly beauty, our protagonist needs to see the folly of sin, perhaps self-reflect a bit and all that. Similarly, our Dante starts the journey by dying and being reborn, by losing their head and all memories within it and becoming a brand new person. The short glimpse we get of the original Dante certainly doesn't seem like a pleasant person, and so far Manager Esquire is showing remarkable character development. Of course, when venturing through hell, Dante witnesses the eternal punishment of sinners in each layer of the Inferno, so calling our lovable found family of 12 bastard children sinners is deliberate as well. That is a no-brainer. We will read a bit further into this later, but for now let's talk about the other persons within this dark, foreboding forest. The three stand-ins for the predators from the poem are wearing a lot of purple snake imagery, clearly alluding that they work for a fixer known as Yori, the Purple Tear. As seen in Ruina, she is already intricately aware of the multitude of possible realities and timelines, and she has some capability to jump between them due to being a wing experiment set free, as far as she says anyway. In the deleted cutscene from the end of Ruina, we know that she intended to start an association of people capable of awakening and wielding ego. The canonicity of that scene is questionable, given it's nowhere to be seen in the final version of the game, but if she did go ahead with it, it seems it's not Limbus, as previously thought, but a third party. Honestly, being a shadowy manipulator that only steps in if needed fits her more than someone that would need to run quarterly profit reports by investors. We are yet to see the return of the Fury Squad, so not much else to be said here. Then we have Vergilius, the tour guide for our merry bus. In the Divine Comedy, the Roman poet Vergilius plays a similar role, as the protagonist asks for guidance from the old masters who inspired him, and the author of the Aeneid steps up. The issue being, he himself is condemned to hell despite being a virtuous man, being an unbaptized pagan. So while he can guide our hero through the prison for the damned and up the mountain of purgatory, that's as far as he can take him. The Red Gaze has a few parallels with the poetic version. He is also a rather good dude cast into hell, going from a pretty chill, if socially inept leader of a fixer team, to an exile forced to serve as a babysitter for a bunch of absolute human wrecks, because the entire plot of Leviathan happened and he had everything taken away from him several times over. His weapon is a white-hot gladius because it cauterizes the wounds of his enemies instantly and prevents bloodshed, potentially even letting them get away to safety once they no longer pose a threat. Similar to the Roman poet, he also has no sympathy for the sinners encountered in the journey. Also, I just find it funny that even in Leviathan he has a personal identification thingy that calls him Vergilius. Man was born for the job and yet he complains. Finally, there is Charon, the bus driver. In the poem, Charon is the ferryman that takes Dante and Virgil across the river Acheron to reach the first layer of hell, after some complaining in the lines of "That guy is alive, what the fuck?" Limbus Charon is a rather childish, single-minded woman doted on by Vergilius. Long story short, her name was Lapis, and she was orphaned by the Red Gaze due to being a daughter of some syndicate bigwigs he wiped out as part of a job, then taken in by him along with other children made parentless by his hand as a sort of atonement. But then, of course, she got entangled with the ring and was subjected to the experiments regarding mirror realities and ended up as Charon, her original personality basically being overwritten by an identity. Unlike the sinners, her condition seems to be permanent and fixing it is at least half of Vergilius' contractually promised payment for the job. Lightning round of other things I thought to be of note. Faust says that the sinners will go wherever Dante's arm points. While it may be just a roundabout way of saying they'll follow their orders, I can't help but notice that the arms of their clock change slightly after Canto IV, so this may get an ironic echo down the line. Vergilius tells one of the predators to tell the serpent, which serves as both a Nito Bible allusion and a call out to Yori. He knows she's behind them, because of course he does. Dante drags the souls of the sinners out of hell by focusing on a star nobody else can see. In the Divine Comedy, the celestial bodies of what we now know is outer space are part of Paradiso. Combine that with stars appearing as thematic points later, and that Star of the City is the highest distinction given to troublemakers in the universe, and I think it's fair to say that some celestial bullshit is going to happen, metaphorical or not. The word aspect in Limbus is left vague. In the poem it is used to portray the figure of the panther suddenly appearing. As such, an aspect may be a permanent version of an identity, or I may completely miss the mark here again. Time will tell. And the word that appears on Dante's coat, and later in the game as a mechanic as well, Durante, was likely Alighieri's first name he received at baptism from his parents. It means enduring, lasting, durable, and fits his role of reviving everyone to try again quite well. Most importantly, we are going to come back to Divine Comedy a lot in future cantos and videos. I thought we'll be out of the woods after the prologue, because sure, the game chapters are called cantos, like the parts of the poem, but how far can it go, really? And of course, the general structure of the game so far fits the poem's progression. We just need to include the preamble before entering Hell as Canto I. So the stories draw not just from the literature that each scenery is based on, but also from Inferno. And I thought this is going to be an easy series to make. With all that setup out of the way, let's embark to Roachtown. The first proper chapter of the story finds us with the mission statement for the whole trip. Go to the ruins of branch facilities of Lobotomy Corporation, a fallen energy-producing megacorp, and obtain golden bows located therein. We can see in Wonderlap, the official webcomic for Lobotomy Corporation, that several such branches operated all over the city, maintaining steady energy production to meet the city's needs, while the main branch plotted, well, the plot of that game. Sadly, the webcomic is not available officially anymore due to the artist's request to pull it due to a certain kerfuffle, so if you wanna read it, you'll need to find unofficial means to do so. A shame really, cause I love it to pieces, but I also prefer the author's request to be honored like that rather than not, so, you know, complex feelings. What the Golden Balls are is not disclosed to us, but given that Lobotomy Corporation had an endless well of cogito used to turn people into abnormalities, and that said well was a disembodied nervous system of a certain someone, I think my guess of those branches being part of that system is not too far off. I will be positively shocked if it's anything else. We also get the first proper look at our boss Mephistopheles, munching people to produce enkephalin, the same materialized form of energy that Lobotomy Corporation produced. As it's made from extreme emotions, it's only reasonable that the bus requires still living people to be fed into it feet first. The power is needed not only to propel the vehicle forward, but also to reach out into the mirror dimensions to give you your gacha pulls. The exact mechanics of this and other features of the bus will be discussed as they appear in the plot in intervallo chapters in later videos. And we'll probably get a whole lot on Mephi in the Faust chapter later on. For now, let's just content with the fact that it may be sentient if we take current treating it like a living being at a face value. We find ourselves in the back streets of District D, and the chapter touches upon the backstory of Gregor, a man with a roach arm who served as a frontline officer for the previous G-Corp and a frontman of propaganda, with his genetic alterations seeming rather manageable and even somewhat aesthetically pleasing, all things considered. This was nothing but a ploy to get people to join the ranks of the corporation, as he was operated on by the chief doctor of the company, whereas everyone else got a much more slapdash treatment, with the genetic alteration affecting heads primarily and verging even more into body horror. Moreover, we can see that Gregor has a lot of control over the arm's actual shape. In the flashback taking place after the war, we can see him with a perfectly human-looking arm, which goes out of control and lunges towards a woman in a moment of emotional vulnerability. His file at the beginning of the chapter also mentions that he needs to keep his feelings in check. As such, I think we can safely speculate that this arm shaping is primarily controlled by emotions, and that keeping it in its back state is the easiest form to maintain for Gregor, because that's what he feels is the real shape of it. If it looks like a human arm, it feels wrong, he knows it should be different. Accepting it for what it is a coping mechanism similar to his laid-back attitude and non-confrontational approach. The arm also regenerates immediately after being cut off, so he cannot get rid of it. It's a permanent reminder of who he was. Either way, the rank-and-file soldiers of the former G-Corp have no such comforts. Their changes are permanent, and after the wing fell, they were doomed to a life of vagrancy and doing whatever they can to survive, and they don't even get the self-healing to compensate. They are forever, visibly, the ex-soldiers of G-Corp, regardless of who they were before the alteration. And that repulses everyone else, as not only is it not exactly aesthetically pleasing, there is also a stigma attached to being an employee of a wing that no longer exists. After all, if they pulled their weight, the company would still be around, so they're clearly not fit to do anything and not doom it to failure as well. The part of the Divine Comedy that this maps onto is the vestibule of hell, after Dante and Virgil cross the gate reading, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." On the shores of the river Acheron are the souls of the uncommitted, living without infamy or praise, as Virgil puts it. Those who took side no other than their own, including angels who neither rebelled nor stayed with God when Lucifer did the thing that we all know and love him for. In the mists of the shore they chase an elusive banner, continuously stung by wasps. It's not particularly difficult to see the parallel between that and the G-Corp soldiers, including Gregor. We have the fading memory of a flag held high in the war, bugs, and people abandoned by their past with nowhere to go, be it up or down. It was the high-ups of the corporation who would suffer either praise or infamy, depending on which side they took in the war, whereas the common soldiers were discarded like tools. This canto in the game also heavily deals with the theme of survivor's guilt, embodied by Gregor and Yuri, for daring to not go down to hell with their fellow co-workers in either G-Wing or Lobotomy Corporation, and instead siding with their own survival. Gregor even says he considers that to be his sin, uncommitted, outcast by his own choice. The novel that inspired Gregor and this canto is Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, in which the protagonist, Gregor Samsa, awakes one day turned into a monstrous bug. The details of his appearance are never said, and Kafka himself insisted on having no specific kind of insect being shown on the cover, which matches the transformative power of Limbus Gregor. In one scene, Gregor looks at his old photo where he wears an officer's uniform, remembering the past military service, which fits the game as well. This sudden transformation repulses his entire family and the manager sent by his employer, who lash out in fear, and Gregor is confined to his room. His father beats him back into the room, his mother wails at the prospect of her son being in such a miserable state, and his sister is the one cleaning his room and leaving him food. And then she is the first to declare that this insect is not Gregor, that they were all fooled and that he should be killed for the peace of their mind. They feel suffocated by him, don't want to even look at him. A man that was the only breadwinner in the house, someone everyone relied on, is turned into an object of fear, hatred and anger. Just like the revered symbol of the G-Corps army became an on-site target for all its surviving soldiers. The elation seen in Gregor's memory is contrasted with the scorn he experiences from his old comrades in the Lobotomy Corporation dungeon delve. And Gregor, in both stories, is filled with shame, because something out of his control just took away everything that defined him overnight. In the book it is his face, his voice, his tastes, his ability to work. In the game, no one man could single-handedly turn the tide of a massive war, and he went from being an icon to a nobody hiding among the city's denizens. With the book, one could argue about the bugness being depression or disability or anything like that, but I think if the problem could be encompassed so simply by Kafka, he would do so. Because being turned into a bug is really just a stand-in for anything that can just destroy your life instantly with no prior warning. And that is a long list of things that we tend to ignore. With the game Gregor, the change is explicitly a genetic mutation, but it is still fair to say that his entire life circumstances were outside of his control. He not once spoke in anger, even as those circumstances have a clear human face. And while he may seem affable and social, this man has not known happiness. He's probably too scared of what his arm would do to even entertain that idea. A mirror of him in the game is Yuri, an employee of Lobotomy Corporation that escaped with her life when the company collapsed and is haunted by guilt once coming across the bodies of her old colleagues. She was abused in that workplace, considering her branch housed an abnormality that demanded regular human sacrifice, yet she still feels bad that she made it out and others didn't. She's looked down upon because of it by her new co-workers in a fixer office, even if they are actually less helpful than she is. Die in a fucking pit, Hopkins! And just like Gregor is implicitly given a new place to fit in as a part of Limbus Company, Yuri is proposed the same thing explicitly, even if not as a team member, then at least as a bus mascot. She finds comfort in this new, yet unformed identity given to her. As we mentioned before, one of the abnormalities found and fought in this branch is the Doomsday Clock, demanding constant sacrifice. In gameplay as well, the best way to approach it is to quickly deal with its minions to offer them up as sacrifice to not have to pay with the life and sanity of your team. But in its final phase, it's best to turn on it and fully beat it before it can activate its final attack, which strikes everyone on both sides. Based on the Mayan calendar, the pop cultural theory of the world ending in 2012 because that's the last date shown on it, and the practice of human sacrifice in that culture to stave off doom, the abnormality is like the essence of the better them than me approach. It demands more and more, turning on everyone equally in the end anyway. It led to the people trapped in the facility turning on each other. It led to the survivors being seen as guilty for something they have not caused directly, and in the story we are told that the employees kept drafting clothes even when held up underground, not even thinking of going against that system to suppress the abnormality regularly or something. Nothing but victims hating each other. The other two abnormalities we fight are Ebony Queen's apple and the Golden Apple, and before we go on, let's consider. Why apples specifically? Well, in the Metamorphosis, Gregor's father uses the fruit as a weapon against his bug-shaped son. One of the apples hits Gregor in the back and lodges itself there. The insect's legs cannot reach it and no one dares approach him to take it out. In time, the apple rots and festers, causing inflammation in the wound surrounding it, ultimately leading to Gregor's demise. Something nice, pretty and desirable, being used as a weapon, turned rotten. It was Gregor's love for his family that ultimately did him in. And don't even get me started on everything else leading up to that point of the story, fucking hell. Limbus Gregor has a similarly unpleasant association with apples, with them being used to train him to become a murder machine. The one who turned him and used him as a weapon is his mother, Herman, a head researcher of G-Corp who now works for N-Corp and is plotting something. Because, of course, the rabble suffers while the top brass responsible for the whole thing can just move on. That's why the first abnormality in the dungeon is focused on the perpetrator who poisoned the apple in the folk story, the evil queen, not the victimized Snow White like the version of the same enemy in Lobotomy Corporation. Herman swoops in with her cronies and takes the golden bow after we did all the hard work. And Gregor Samsa's father was a failed businessman who lived off his son's income and only went back to work after the bagification. Oh, literally parallels, how I love ye. The father is not named in Metamorphosis, but Herman Kafka was the real name of the novelist's father, and the relationship between them was... Hey, let's just read a fragment of another work of Kafka's titled Dearest Father, a letter addressed to good old Papa that spans over 50 pages.
Sometimes I imagine a map of the earth laid out, and you stretched diagonally across it, and then it seems to me that I can only lead my own life in the areas that are neither covered by your body, nor within your reach. And, given the impression I have of your size, that leaves me with only a few, not welcoming areas.
Ah, parental issues, the number one exporter of great prose in the world. Finally, we need to touch upon Yuri getting suddenly eaten by the golden apple. Not only is it an unfair, sudden moment of her life crashing down despite the hopes she had for the future, akin to Gregor Samsa turning into a bug, but it's also an ironic echo. In the novel, Gregor's sister says the bug is not her brother and that the family must kill him. In Limbus, the same is echoed by Dante. This is not Yuri. Cut it down. And we'll never know if any semblance of her mind remained. Just like Gregor Samsa's family, we did not even try communicating with it after all. But the abnormality being a golden apple certainly does seem to invoke the myth of such an item causing discord among goddesses and causing the Trojan War. As Otis was also involved in the Smoke War, the parallels between the two fictional conflicts will likely continue in the future. And so we return to the bus, covered in blood and having achieved nothing. We will likely return to Gregor's parental troubles in the future, with Herman being a big player in the background of the entire story. He also mentions, in past tense, a sister of an age similar to Yuri. In the novel, Gregor's sister was 17, and it was mentioned that Yuri was very young, so that part fits. But I just feel like she is too big of a character in the novel to just be brushed aside in one line like that. I believe we will hear of her again, accompanied by the sound of a violin. Similarly, Herman alludes to the arm being just one part of her gift to Gregor, and when you activate suddenly one day the original ego of our bad guy, it is bound by the symbols of the library floors from Ruina. The library was built to resemble the diagram of the Tree of Life from the Kabbalah, a mystical tradition of Judaism, and Franz Kafka was Jewish as well. As the tree is meant to represent the complete truth of how the universe is made, and the arm seems to be able to reconstruct itself into anything, I think we'll see more about Gregor and what else his body is capable of later. Maybe in the layer of violence, in the subcircle of violence committed against nature itself, but that's just a guess. Before Charon steps on the gas pedal again, I would like to let you know that the video is not sponsored. In lieu of an outbreak, please visit stopkillinggames.com, especially if you ever owed Ubisoft's The Crew that went offline recently. Ross Scott of Accursed Farms is trying to use the law to keep live service games from getting killed off in some shape and form, and given that Limbus is gonna inevitably die one day due to being a gacha, I figured my audience here would have a vested interest in supporting that. Our next stop is in the back streets of the J District, ruled by a wing whose claim to fame is being able to close anything. Due to technology to extract wish power or just straight up luck out of people being present in the district long before, a countermeasure was needed to prevent people from just mugging you in the street to take all your good fortune away. And of course, the chapter focuses on the party's outspoken hedonist, Rodion, and our next golden bow is located under a casino. In our effort to try and map the chapters of the game to the Divine Comedy, this canto is related to the first layer of Hell, Limbo. The level of hell for those who cannot go to heaven or purgatory, as they did not go through baptism, but also did not deserve to go any lower in hell like people who actually did horrible things. As such, it's a pretty chill place, a deficient version of heaven. Not quite perfect, but not torturous either. The people in it are bummed that they don't get to see the glory of the real thing, but apparently when Jesus died he went to limbo and whisked away some people to heaven, such as Adam. So there is hope that at the end of days the sinners without actual sins will get a second shot. While not related to Limbus, I need to mention that Dante's Italian bias is pissing me off because Caesar gets to chill in limbo, but my boy Alexander suffers below. Like what the Inferno, dude? Anyway, in Limbus the casino itself is the deficient form of heaven in the form of the Jacob nest. It glitters and shines from a distance, alluring people to go in and try to reach this paradise by getting rich, only to keep them trapped inside because, of course, everything is stacked against the players and the house always wins. When first approaching the building, the sinners think it's surrounded by other tall buildings, as if it was in the center of a bustling city. In truth, the surrounding structures are stacks of wrecked cars in a junkyard, abandoned by the gamblers or given up as collateral to the think tank gang. And in the vault beneath the casino, debtors stole away with a promise of freedom if they pay it off. 1 an for 1 swing of the pickaxe. So there is hope of getting out of this hell, but it is soul-crushingly far away. Rodia is based on Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, the protagonist of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoyevsky. But I'll be honest with you, there isn't that much connection between her and the novel in question. In the novel, the protagonist is an impoverished student in St. Petersburg, who had to drop out of university due to being barely able to sustain himself. Overdue on rent, he entertains the idea of killing an old pawnbroker crone, who is widely despised by people in the city. After all, how much good could be done with her money, how much poverty like his own alleviated? He is terrified by these thoughts, but also allured. After all, is he not a great man, hindered by circumstance? He's handsome, intelligent, kind of hard, the kind of guy who gives away the last bit of his money to help a girl on the street that was clearly abused. He is also terrible in social situations, drove away almost all relationships he had from his time at the university, and can't even tell a drunk telling him his entire life story that he's not interested. Dude would love Twitter is what I'm saying. He would get so many retweets for posting about killing pawnbrokers, it's unreal. And then his mother writes to him saying that his beloved sister lost her job but got a marriage proposal from a much older rich dude, and said Mr. Moneybags would even give Rodion a job. Thinking the guy is not to be trusted, and frankly being proven correct by later events in the story, Rodion decides he can't have his sister suffer on his behalf. He takes an axe and slams the blunt side of it on the pawnbroker's head, the blade being turned towards himself, symbolizing how he actually struck his own soul. And then he also kills an innocent bystander, the pawnbroker's sister, as she witnessed the murder. And over the remaining hundreds of pages of the story, Rodion understands more and more how horrible the act was. The basics are here. Rodia kills a tax collector with an axe, though she does it with the blade of it. Her actions harm the innocent, as the crone was connected to the Middle Syndicate and her entire neighborhood suffers because of her actions. The murder is motivated both by spite against the rich and the suffering of someone close to her, as she mentions a child in her neighborhood eating out of garbage. Heck, the canto even starts in a pawn shop, and you could say that Effie and Saud's immaculate plan falling apart is in service to both be a parallel to Rodion's less than ideal murder robbery, and a great introduction to how the greatest strength of the sinners as a team is their incredibly varied skills and perspectives, letting them adapt to the situation on the fly and get a favorable result even when everything seems to be falling apart when viewed through the lens of implementing a plan. One more connecting element is the character of Sonia, Rodia's childhood friend and the leader of Eurodivie, a syndicate she was once a part of, a downright socialist revolutionary group looking to reform the city to prevent the rampant wealth inequality. The name of the group roughly translates to Fools for Christ, and in real life relates to a group of saints from the Orthodox Church who have abandoned all material wealth and connections in order to fully serve. Not hard to see how, in a religion-less context of the city, the same asceticism could be applied to people who fully devote themselves to another mission, such as a revolution. Sonia is based on Sofia Semyonovna Marmeladovna, another character who was dealt a bad hand in life. Her father is a drunk who wastes all money away and then dies after falling under a horse. Her stepmother dies of tuberculosis. To provide for her younger siblings, Sofia sells her body. And still, she is the kindest, most altruistic person imaginable. She starts Rodion's path to redemption by listening to him confess his murder to her. In a way, she serves as a foil to him, as they are both sinners in a way, but while Rodion's crime was ultimately self-serving, hers is anything but. In that way, I think we can see Sonia as a potential vision of the endgame, a promise of heaven in some way. Equality for all is not something anyone with a kind heart could find disagreeable after all. If it's true or not, we will have to wait quite some time to see. I also think it's neat that Sofia is described as having striking blue eyes, while Sonia's are purple, but similarly attracting attention from the viewer quite easily. We also need to know that, unlike in the novel, Rodia says that Sonia knew she would do something this drastic and did nothing to stop her, and he doesn't disagree. But the jury is out on how much of it is truth and how much is our girl projecting. But why are Eurodivie a socialist group? Well, that's quite simple really, because Dostoyevsky, the author, was arrested and sentenced to death for being a part of one as well. His sentence was then lightened to years of hard labor, but if we read Crime and Punishment as Dostoyevsky venting about his mistakes of youth, especially considering that in his writing from that time he was already more of a monarchist conservative than a revolutionary, it's quite easy to see why Limbus Rodia's past is written this way. In some way, she is both thinking that she is special and needs to be the one who makes things right, like Raskolnikov, while also at some point being a true believer in making the world a better place by any means necessary, which is likely what pushed Dostoyevsky into company of people he didn't fully agree with. I just hope she doesn't turn into a head apologist claiming that everything good in the city was done by the arbiters and that the Polish people don't deserve independence. I said she did nothing wrong once, I'd like not to be made into a liar. It's also important to note that Dostoyevsky was a massive gambling addict. But you don't have to believe me, I have a letter he wrote to his wife as proof. Take it away.
Now, Anya, believe me or not, but I swear to you that I didn't intend to gamble. But after arriving at the gambling hall, I went over and stood at the table and began staking my head. Would I guess right or not? And what do you think, Anya? I guessed right about 10 times in a row. I even guessed 0. I was so struck that I started playing in 5 minutes and won 18 thalers. I lost everything by 9:30 and went out like a madman.
So yes, I guess it's safe to say that this was a deciding factor in why this canto takes place in a casino as well. As it is, we have Rodia with an unfaltering faith in herself, who also by her own admission feels cold and like she should suffer a bit more before returning to any warmth. Any sociability she shows is quite clearly a mask, funnily enough a polar opposite of the novel protagonist. But just like him, Sonia notes that her driving impulse is not altruism as much as it is the feeling of personal superiority. It has to be her, personally, that has the hand in fixing the world. Long planning and gradual change irks her. So yeah, I hope we'll get to see more of her. Maybe at the violence layer in the sub-circle of self-harm to fit the original novel more? Also, come on, there are so many important characters from the book that could show up. There's Porfiry Petrovich No Last Name, literally a Russian Columbo written decades before Columbo graced our TV sets. Or Arkady Romanov's Svidrigailov, another foil to Rodion because he's an actually vile, self-centered piece of shit that still gets hit by his conscience like a train and it makes him go to America. There's so much potential if even just these two get explored. As for the abnormalities, we have pink shoes representing a self-destructive impulse, Hurtily is disarmed by saying you don't love the city you live in repeatedly, I suppose being symbolic of Rodia's rejection of conforming to how things are, and Baba Yaga encased in ice due to how cold Rodia's heart currently is, plus it's not the witch herself but her house, so it also may symbolize the tax collector's family of the middle coming after Rodia as her killer and destroying everything in their path. I like the visual of the huge house on the chicken foot, but man, easily the least interesting fight in the game considering how you just run away from it by cutting through extras. Notable side notes, we had some small glimpses in the sinner's psyche, like Heathcliff wearing a worn-out ring he really cares for, Dawn dropping her voice completely when her dancing is criticized as ungenuine, Sinclair maraca shaking being described as showing some inner turmoil, and Honglu being a little shit that definitely understands the social context around him, but is always saying the thing that would aggravate the other party the most for kicks. Not much to say here, this canto just had a lot of seed planting for future developments. We'll get to what Sonia talked about regarding a mark and changing the world in a bit. First, let's visit the party child's hometown. The third chapter of our journey takes us to the nest of K-Corp, the manufacturers of miraculous HP bullets that are able to cure any injury. In line with that theme, they call their employees by titles related to biology, like thrombocytes for people requested to fix a glass wall that Dawn smashed, or leukocytes for security. It's really cute, I like it, but before we get into the nest, we need to get through an immigration process. Incidentally, in the Divine Comedy, we now cross to the second layer of hell, punishing those whose sin was lust. The path down is guarded by King Minos, who listens to the confession of everyone passing and a snake wraps around him to deliver the judgment. One coil of the serpent per layer of hell. I think it's no coincidence that this exact spot in the story is where we first enter a nest and need to go through the process of getting our work visa checked. We'll get to the specifics of how this part of hell works a bit later. The color fixer that gives our bastard children a thorough thrashing is named Siegfried, likely in a reference to the Germanic folk hero and protagonist of an opera by Wagner of the same name, but he isn't on screen in this canto for long enough to draw any visible parallels. The one thing I can say is that his bravado and lack of care about his every exploit being televised, despite the fact that this knowledge could probably be used against him, matches the mythical Siegfried's fearlessness. Truly a perfect role model for Dawn. Then we get Vergilius kicking the shit out of her for screwing up yet again, and likely making him fear that everything he sacrificed for the company is going to be for nothing. Again, no relation to any book in real life, I just wanted to put this CG on screen. The story takes us on a trauma road trip to Sinclair's hometown of Kalw, currently in the process of being burnt to the ground by inquisitors of Encorp, or Nagel und Hammer. The name of the village is the birthplace of Herman Hesse, the author of Demian, the story of boyhood. However, when first publishing it, it was attributed to be authored by Emil Sinclair, and that it was a written down recollection of a real person's life. While definitely dramatized, it can be safely said that the novel was in part autobiographical for Hesse, a way to externalize his thoughts after undergoing psychotherapy regarding the inner conflict he felt between his religious upbringing and the unclean, dark urges he felt growing up, like budding sexuality. As such, we will intermix the biographical and fictional a bit going forward. Hesse's family was pietist, which is a Lutheran movement that puts emphasis on biblical doctrine and individual piety, encouraging everyone to live as purely and holy as possible. Combine that with the fact that they moved to Kalw a few years before the author was born, originally stemming from Estonia, and it's easy to see why for the young Hesse, and therefore for Emil Sinclair as well, it seemed like his family home was a completely different, separate world from everything around it. One bright and familiar, the other dark and alien, and yet alluring and interesting. In the opening chapters of the novel, young Emil Sinclair listens to his classmates boasting and telling tales typical of youth, venturing into what is forbidden, unknown, exciting. Not wanting to be left out, he makes up a tale of being a part of something that is the talk of the town recently, stealing apples from an orchard. One of his classmates, Franz, takes the story to heart and bullies Sinclair into obedience. He can get a monetary reward from the cops for pointing to the perpetrator of the apple theft after all. Sinclair feels forcefully ripped away from the comfort and security of his home, thinking that he cannot confess to his family, and thrown into the dark world of reality. In Limbus, the story goes a bit different. Rather than a lie dooming Sinclair, it is the truth. His father works on an important project with another wing, and this world's version of Cromer correctly understands that it makes him quite a big shot, likely to be connected to something important. But far more importantly, Cromer sees and understands one more thing about Sinclair, that he is disgusted by his family getting full-body replacements for their flesh and blood, and that he is going to get the same treatment after graduating. This repulsion towards the prosthetics, something seen as a universal good in Kalw, unifies them. They become fast friends. It's interesting how, while in the novel the darkness came from outside and isolated Sinclair from feeling safe at his own home, in Limbus the relation is somewhat reversed. It was the safe and familiar household changing from within that pushed Emil out. In the novel, the comforting world was described as Scheinwelt, meaning both world of light and world of illusion, because it did not encompass the whole truth of reality despite its comforts. In Limbus, it changes visually, with human bodies replaced with machines, but that change is the illusion itself. In their final moments, after being massacred by the Inquisitors, Sinclair's family cries out to him and tells him to run, proving they were the same people despite seeming completely alien to him. The final nail, in the coffin of the backstory was Sinclair taking Cromer to his basement, which connected to the L-Corp branch underground. Given that Cromer was revealed to have been an N-Corp plant all along, I'm not surprised she had the means to discover that information once learning how important Sinclair's family is, but the connection seems, I don't know, kinda spotty. Like, why was a branch of the biggest energy provider hidden like that? Was it already sunken there due to the aftermath of Lobcorp's plot? If that's the case, was Sinclair's home built in the last however long it took between then and now? It definitely doesn't seem to have been years. I hope they return to this and give my pedantic ass answers. Anyway, Cromer kills Sinclair's entire family and gives him 2 coins as chances to come over to her side, whereas Franz Cromer bullied Emil due to being owed 2 high-value coins for not ratting him out. Also, it's worth noting that in both instances, Sinclair feels haunted by Cromer's distinctive whistle, like it's beckoning him and compelling him to act obedient. In Limbus, it seems that Cromer is positively fascinated by Sinclair and wants him, which is where the theme of lust comes into play. She wants him converted to her cause, at any cost, to see the mirror reality in which he is her strongest reactionary murder machine. You could also argue that the obsession with bodily purity, not replacing anything with mechanical parts, is related to the idea of lust as well. It is, after all, carnal. Her form, upon distorting, also heavily resembles the peccatula associated with that sin. The punishment from the Divine Comedy, being carried back and forth by endless winds and storms, doesn't seem to be present in Limbus, however. Cromer also took great effort to make the purge take place during fake Christmas. In the novel, the holiday is pleasant for Sinclair and he thinks of it fondly. Here it's most likely because in Korea, similarly to Japan, the day does not carry much religious connotation and is rather a day to celebrate bonds with others, like family and especially loved ones. The other important character in the novel is the titular Max Demian, an older boy who enrolls in Sinclair's class and seems to be way more mature than everyone else. Sinclair confesses his folly to him, and Demian serves as a sort of a spiritual guide for his problems, starting from the easiest solution, which is murder. It doesn't come to that, but the threat of Cromer is dealt with by Max, who continues to haunt Sinclair for the rest of his life, be it in the flesh or as a dream. I know what you're thinking, and you are 100% correct. I'm not one for shipping, but when you have a protagonist get smitten by his best friend's mom because she looks like him, and then dream of said friend passing a kiss on the lips from his mom along, these are not allegations, these are facts. To briefly summarize a novel that I honestly recommend that you read for yourself, Demian is another denizen of that dark, alluring world of reality. He embodies the central theme of the story, that life cannot be easily split into good things to follow and bad things to avoid. That reality includes both of these polarities. That if there is a god that created all of it, then it cannot be the version of divinity that Sinclair is told about at home and during mass, because that god only fits half of the world. That there must be another deity that created everything, good and bad, true and illusory. And they reach the conclusion that it shall be named Abraxas, and that within everyone are the yearnings to fully realize their true self if only they understand and follow them, regardless of moral judgment. If Sinclair felt that killing Cromer would be wrong, then it was wrong for him, and that was a good call, as an example. It's worth noting that in Limbus, all of Sinclair's mistakes happen when he goes against his instincts. Fighting the urge to bite his nails, he cuts them short and ends up hurting himself because of it. Rather than tell Cromer they should turn back because he has a bad feeling, he follows her infectious enthusiasm, and so on. The world that Sinclair knows, the illusory light and warmth he learned from his family, is akin to an eggshell. It protects him, but he will need to break it to spread his wings and truly be a bird, be himself. One of the interesting twists that Demian brings up is regarding the story of Cain and Abel. In his reading, the murder was probably true, but the mark on Cain's forehead was not placed there after the fact, it was always there. Not a real, visible sign, but some other quality. Be it charisma, intelligence, some inner power, it was something that kept people away from Cain and prevented them from killing him in retaliation, as if he was the first documented Ubermensch. Sinclair notes that Demian himself seems to have that sort of allure to him, and Demian also tells his mother that Sinclair has the mark. It's worth noting that Demian can be interpreted as being Sinclair's demon. Not in the Christian horns and pitchfork meaning, but in the ancient Greek reading of a spirit, a guiding wisdom. For example, in ancient Greek philosophy, a lot of discussion is centered around the meaning of happiness, which in their language was the word eudaimonia, having a good demon or spirit. The name is certainly close enough, and Demian has a whole lot of interest in watching Sinclair grow, even staying behind to graduate school at the very same time as him, and honestly is more present in Sinclair's thoughts than physically, as if he was the budding self-realization of a young boy given material form, suggesting both good and bad, but only following up on what the kid truly desires. At the very end, Sinclair even sees Demian in his own reflection, as if he reached the ideal he saw in his friend for all these years. Don't ask me what that means for the mom-kissing business. Now let's get to Demian in Limbus. Shows out of nowhere and deals with Cromer? Check. Speaks in riddles? Check. Mark of Cain on his forehead? Check. Noted to move soundlessly and it seems like he exists completely separately from everyone else? Oh, you bet that is a check. Interestingly, it's noted that Cromer did not approach Sinclair on the days when he talked with Demian, either implying he was self-reflecting when she wasn't taking up all his attention, or some weird anti-Cromer protection field. Possibly both, as Cromer would not approach Sinclair when he was deeply in thought about something other than his life situation. It's also worth noting that Sinclair has the mark in the N-Corp ID after he, does kin strife. So the mark can have both the biblical murderer connotation as well as the more idealistic special potential one. Nobody's telling Limbus that it can't have some extra fucked up implications as a treat. Additionally, you assemble the symbol from the ego gifts in this chapter's dungeon, and it symbolizes Sinclair's growing determination to take Cromer down, living up to his potential to overcome the fear that paralyzed him all his life, but also gearing up for murder. Because the bosses in this dungeon are all Inquisitors who underwent ego corrosion, there ain't that much thematic depth to extract here. The N-Corp Inquisitors, especially Cromer, are enamored by the illusion of humanity contained in its physical form, but are hypocritically still willing to stretch and alter it to fit their needs. Probably not a coincidence that the seals on their armor feel very evocative of Warhammer 40k Space Marines as well. I think it's important that this is the first chapter in which we see a distortion, because it means Cromer also has a demon whispering into her ear and guiding her to live in accordance to the promptings that come from her soul, which is of course Carmen. As I keep saying, she did nothing wrong, she's just the spiritual guide leading people to breaking their shells, regardless of morality. Please don't look at the mountain of corpses the fight takes place on. One last thing of note is that Demian mentions his likely prophetic vision of climbing a ladder to heavens, looking down and seeing the city being dead and dark. In the novel, a similar vision is described of a world in flames, but also of potential for rebirth after that death. As the novel came out 1 year after the end of World War I, all I can say is, oh my sweet poet, I wish the change brought by that conflict was as drastic as you hoped it would be. But in Limbus, this means foreshadowing. For a bird to fly, first it needs to break out of its shell. The shell is the world. We already know that the bows have the potential to change the world permanently, according to what Sonia said. Whatever is the endgame of Limbus, it will be setting altering. Maybe the mark is the aspect, a signifier of the potential to create a new world once this one dies. Sonia notes that Rhodia doesn't have it, but some other members of the team do, likely meaning Sinclair, and maybe Dante as well. So far, all we know is that we have a team of people directly tied to the existence of golden bows, that those branches have the power to alter reality, and that there are at least 4 groups after them for that power. Limbus Company, N-Corp, Demian's group, and Eurodivie. Only the last one has a stated end goal for now, though with N-Corp and the things shown so far, it can be inferred that their vision of the future involves the purity of humanity, whatever the hell that may mean exactly. And I just love Demian summarizing my thoughts on Cromer as being in love with an image so much as to fake it, not realizing the hypocrisy of it. Thank you, Demon Boy. And so our chapter ends, with Dante feeling pity for the first time and trying to reach out to Sinclair in the final battle, but failing to find the right words. But rather than steal his heart as they go down, hopefully our clockhead will grow into a better, more communicative manager. And with that, we shall take a stop. The bus needs refueling, and I need to find and read biographies of like 9 Korean poets. Huge thanks to Eric03 for drawing the wonderful thumbnail of this video, as well as to Sulmatul for reading out the quotes from letters. I recently guest starred in her video on Revolutionary Girl Utena if that series interests you. And as always, nothing but pure thankfulness to the sponsors of our company now visible on the screen, thanks to whom we can feed our adorably aloof bus drivers. Special thanks to new members, Swamp Level, KTL, and Not Grun. Additional shoutout to a donation from Tana Windin. The tour will continue in, let's say, second half of this year again. I wanna play other games as well after all. Let's stretch our legs until then.